Today on The Social, we're acknowledging the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation by shining a light on Indigenous issues, including the end of North America's largest powwow. Does the commercialization of cultural events undermine their cultural significance? And after British Columbia's Supreme Court's ruling to grant First Nations full ownership of land in Richmond, we discuss whether property rights should depend on lineage. Then, let's go for Indigenous tonight. Gorgeous, mouth-watering dishes made with locally sourced and foraged ingredients. Plus, revitalizing language, why it's so critical for healing, and what efforts are underway in Indigenous communities across the country. And Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter Susan Aglukark shares the uplifting story of her journey to healing and self-discovery in her new memoir. It all starts now on The Social.
It is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and we have got some incredible guests joining us on the show today. First up, writer and scholar, you know her, you love her, Riley Yesno is back. And Associate Professor in McMaster's Department of Sociology and Indigenous Studies, Vanessa Watts, also back. Welcome. So an event called Gathering of Nations in Albuquerque is North America's largest powwow. But after 43 years, organizers are saying that 2026 is going to be the last year for their event. So according to the Canadian press, there has been some criticism over the years that perhaps organizers are capitalizing on Indigenous culture, that it's become perhaps more commercialized with prize money for things like dancing and drumming competitions. So the question is, does the commercialization of these events actually undermine the cultural significance? So we're going to start this conversation with you, Vanessa. What's your take on this?
No, I don't think it does necessarily. You know, a lot of powwow dancers and artisans, they earn their money throughout the summer months. It's seasonal work, they perform, they do beadwork, they sew, and having this sort of stage where there's a lot of participants who come, attendees, this is a way in which they can make money. And so for a lot of dancers, they go every weekend to a different powwow, and this is how they sustain their home life, their family, and how they introduce their children into this way of life.
Yeah. I mean, it's a curious event because we're not clear about why exactly that they're deciding to stop it. And I understand that it is a non-Indigenous person who started this particular one. So I wonder if there's some connection there.
43 years ago,
43.
Yeah.
So it's been going for a while. They say, the people who were interviewing this article were saying this just sort of run its course, was the impression that it's given. I guess I had the same thought as you, though. Like, I don't see why you wouldn't want to make the artisans and the people involved make as much money as possible. But then I thought of something like the Pride Parade, which is not a cultural event, although I guess it is a cultural event to some extent. And every year, you know, what started out as this smaller protest, as it's grown, which has been wonderful for recognition, but at the same time, every year you hear the same complaints, which is it's become too commercial, it's too much based on money, it's watered down the meaning behind it. So I don't know where that tipping point lies.
Yeah, but that's always the purists, always are the ones with those types of complaints. They're like, yeah, it's better when it was like grassroots. But I think, you know, it's inevitable. The commercialization is inevitable because as something grows, of course you want money because, as to your point, all of the people who will benefit from that money. I think what's important, what people should really focus on is who's in charge Are they really serving the community that this event is based on? And the money that's coming in, because there's always money, are you being transparent about that money, where that money is going, and is it going back to the community? I think that is the main concern that people have with commercialization. And I am actually, like, I'm gutted for this community because I know that events like this, most people will just go and enjoy the day, but this is almost like a living classroom to learn about the food, the music, the cultural recognition, everything. And the idea that this is going away is so sad. And you know, we have a big event, I'm Caribbean, and we have a huge event, the Caribbean Carnival Festival. It's changed names so many times. If I got it wrong, forgive me. Right? It started in the early 60s and it was a way for us to celebrate our culture. And now it's a huge event with millions of dollars coming into the city, tens of thousands of people coming in. But what people don't know while they're enjoying it is that it's gone through a lot of turmoil about who's in charge, where the money goes. And I think there are a lot of people who take it for granted. But if it ever went away, I think we would really feel that hurt. So that's why I'm so hurt for this community.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I ultimately, I think, lean on the side of like, I'm flexible about this. And I think powwows are a great spot to like also show that they can evolve and they can change because they're a newer tradition for Indigenous people. Like people see them because they're public facing and they're open to the public as like the cultural event in Indigenous communities. But they're only about like 100 years old, which relative to other events is actually very, very young. And so with that, I think there's room to say, we can try new things and we can bring different people in and we can expand it in certain ways. And so I don't think we have to be very rigid about what a powwow has to look like, is I guess what I'm trying to get at here. But at the same time, to Cynthia's point, I do agree that like where there is a line and that we have to be careful of is like, the thing with pride parades is when they started to, for example, take in money with banks who were actively harming like queer people in other countries or who were not actually giving money to the thing, and they called it like pink washing, right? And so now in Indigenous communities, there's this ongoing phenomenon of like what we call orange washing, right? Is like, we have to make sure that when we're doing things that we can take in money and we can use that to bolster our artists and to our communities and all of those things, but we also have to make sure that we're critical about that and doing it in like a really ethical and you know, thoughtful sort of way. So is it possible? Yes.
Yeah. More transparency.
Yeah.
Okay, we're moving on to this. Should an Indigenous play move forward without Indigenous actors? So playwright Drew Hayden Taylor wrote in the Globe and Mail that his latest show was actually canceled because there weren't enough older Indigenous actors to cast, especially those interested in doing theater. I think it's important to note that he himself is Indigenous, but Riley, do you think should an Indigenous play go forward if it lacks Indigenous actors?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the conflict because I'm like, I would love to see Drew Hayden Taylor's play. I think he's very funny. I think that should be seen and it should be great. At the same time, if I saw a non-Indigenous person playing an Indigenous person on stage, I'd feel weird. I'd be like, ooh. Fair. And I think part of that is because, like, especially for Indigenous communities, we have this very real phenomenon of people pretending to be Indigenous all the time, you know? Yeah. And so, like, there is like this extra layer of like seeing that I think has an impact that maybe other communities you wouldn't necessarily see. Like, no one pretends necessarily to be part of the LGBTQ community the same way they might pretend to be part of an Indigenous community. So that's a weird, like, I think triggery thing.
It's interesting because some people will say, well, the artistic freedom is, well, isn't all acting the idea of someone playing somebody that they're not, right? And so some people would actually use that argument to say, just get the story out, let's do it. But the flip side is artistic freedom historically only goes one way. We have constantly seen white actors play non-white roles throughout the history of cinema and plays. And so the idea is, it seems fine and dandy when a white actor plays a non-white actor, but at the same time, when you flip it, is it the same? It seems the equity only seems to flow in one direction. You know?
Yeah, I think that there are certain circumstances where the play should go forward. So Drew Hayden Taylor, he is Anishinaabe. He is very well esteemed in the community. And I think it does depend on, is this an ensemble cast with mostly Indigenous actors and perhaps one they cannot cast? Should an entire production be canceled and that story not be told? There are Indigenous crew members, writers, directors who may lose an opportunity to tell that story. So I do agree with Riley. It does make you feel weird, but then I also think about this kind of phenomenon of pretendians, right? White people pretending to be Native. I mean, when we think about kind of vetting this, right, in the theater, like who's gonna start doing that vetting, investigating, are you really from where you say you are? Who's going to take on that labor. And I'm not saying that we should just sort of say, well, anybody goes then, right?
Yeah.
But it does add this layer of complexity over what
course.
stories can be told.
Well, the interesting thing in this case, well, first of all, I feel like there are increasingly so many amazing Indigenous actors, but I
absolutely.
feel like I've seen them more in film than in plays. And plays have less of a budget, so I wonder if that's a stumbling block. But it's also the age range. But I just think, like, if you can find a younger actor, then just age makeup?
Yep.
Like, could that not work in this
Absolutely.
case?
Here's
Right?
another solution. Here's another quick solution. Go to find your nearest Indigenous community, build a relationship, hold a casting call, and build up that
The
community.
pipeline.
Yeah,
Yes.
build up the pipeline and then document it, make a docuseries we all watch highlighting the issue and then promote your play. You're welcome.
Yep.
That's all.
And actually,
Right?
so where the play was canceled is in Port Dover, and the nearest community is Six Nations. That's where I live, and it's the largest reserve in
could've held
Canada. And I
auditions
think
and found his people.
people would
We
be
need to call
surprised.
you.
Well, yeah, I'm available.
Oh, Vanessa.
Yeah. But yeah,
Oh,
I take your point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a quick break. Great conversation to kick off the show. We're going to take a quick break, and then should property rights be based on lineage? The debate at the center of the historic BC court ruling on Indigenous land ownership. It's going to be hot right after this. These are really important conversations that we're having here on the show. And if you want to be a part of them, find us on social media. We want to hear your take on our debate here online.
All right, a bombshell land claim ruling by BC Supreme Court in August gave the Cowichan Nation title to 7.5 square kilometers of land in Richmond, land their ancestors once fished and lived on. Now, CTV reports that some of it is currently owned by the Crown, some by the city, and the rest by private owners, which leaves homeowners across the country wondering what this could mean for their properties. The province says it's appealing the decision, so it's not over yet. So the big question is, should property rights depend on lineage? Riley, I'm gonna send this one to you first. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think this author is really oversimplifying what is actually the author that we were talking about in preparation for this, that was talking about the case and said, it shouldn't be based on lineage. I'm like, it already is, If you come from a white settler descended family, you have intergenerational wealth and land that is built over the years. You have that already, And so, let's not pretend that we live in a completely egalitarian, equal society where everybody's starting off on the same foot. We're not. Yeah, right? And then the second thing I want to talk about is that, this is a really important case, I think, not just because of the material land that this nation is getting back, but also it's because of the worldview that it says. Indigenous people have a collectivist worldview, and that everything is communally owned, not just for the generation that's currently living there, but for the generations that are going to come. And so this idea that, no, the individual landowner, it should be the highest form of rights that we have. That is whatever, is a colonial mindset. It's one that we're trying to uphold and impose. And I think that it's just really short-sighted and narrow. And so I am so happy for this nation. And I also think that it's a good opportunity for us to also learn about the land that we're talking about. 90% of Canada is Crown land. 90%. Only 10% is private property. And a smaller fraction of that is even private individual property and not commercial. And so people with this idea that Indigenous people are gonna come for your land, there's a lot of land out there, guys, that we're talking about. I'm not coming for you in your cottage, I'm sorry.
But it's interesting, there's a lot of fear-mongering going on. The article you're referring to was very alarmist. And so for a lot of people, it's like they hear this and they automatically think, well, then I'm gonna get a knock on my door one day and someone's gonna say, you know what, you don't own your house, which is not actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And yet, within this latest situation that we were talking about in BC, there is, in this designated area that the judge has granted, there are a few multi-million-dollar homes. What I found really interesting is one of the guys, he didn't want to be interviewed for it, but I guess someone asked him, how do you feel about the fact that you're now caught up in this thing? He's not worried at all, which tells me there's no reason to be worried, that people are making much ado about nothing. But just to play devil's advocate, is there some potential that down the road, if the laws change, that somebody could come up and say, okay, you've had this home in your family for ages, you actually no longer own it. And what does that mean for finances? What does that mean for, what could that mean?
Well, Crown land is also collective. So First Nations land and Aboriginal title is a collective right, as Riley was talking about. And so, no, this is not going to happen where individual citizens are going to lose their home. In fact, these sorts of decisions have been made by the court since 1973, since the Frank Calder decision, where Aboriginal title was recognized across Canada, especially in BC. Nobody lost their homes. We don't have that history. We don't own that sort of history where we remove people from their lands. Another group does.
That's true.
We don't own that history, right? And so for one, just in terms of values and principles, that has never happened, but also legally, that can't happen, right? Because it's a collective ownership. So what you might see is that maybe some property taxes, a percentage would go to the First Nation, maybe leasing opportunities for businesses would go to a local First Nations. Nobody's getting removed from their homes. I live on reserve. I have a mortgage. My house that I pay for is on Crown land, as Riley talks about. So I don't own the land that my house sits on, right? And so I pay a higher interest rate for my mortgage because my house can never be seized by the bank because it's not fee simple land. So this notion also that we get free houses, we're going to take the houses. No, actually the government owns the land that my house sits on that I pay for.
It's, I hate to use this term because it's been used in different contexts, but the idea of white fright, that's what I felt when I was reading this article.
Same.
That there was a lot, it felt like dog whistling to say, they are coming for your land.
Right.
And I just went, well, why are you doing that? And to your point about history, when I took a look, just, anybody who still is doing high school history, maybe even elementary school, the British and the French, they have done this and continue to do this. You have the Brits, your last name is Loyst?
Yeah, I know.
Because of loyalists?
I'm fully aware.
And the British, when they took over Upper Canada, AKA Ontario, they were giving land to the loyalists who were running from the American Revolution, and they said, here's some land, come up here. And that land is hereditary. It only was able to get passed down through to the first son, usually. And the French did it as well. Les seigneuries, if you understand French history and New France, les seigneurs, they were the lords of the land. And they were literally giving up land to their sons and their sons and their sons. There's a long history of this. So it's like, whose land and who's getting upset? Okay, that's what I kind of want. I see. Just get into the history book.
It's very interesting because when I was reading the article, I was thinking, for the past couple of years, we've been having a lot of conversations about truth and reconciliation between the Indigenous communities and the Canadian government. And then when I'm reading the story about this Cowichan case, I'm wondering, as Indigenous people, how do you feel about these conversations that we've been having over the past few years in light of this story?
Yeah, to me, this is what truth and reconciliation actually is, right? It's really nice, back to my conversation about orange washing, it's really nice to have these national days, to learn more, education, we do land acknowledgements now. The conversation around Indigenous rights certainly has really exploded, and we've changed on that front. But how many Indigenous communities still live without clean water, who still can't get homes on their reserves? The material lived conditions that Indigenous people live with have not changed very much since the TRC came out in 2015. And so that is the type of stuff that actually changes those lived conditions. Give them authority and jurisdiction and autonomy over how they live their lives. And so I think that's what we should be aiming for.
And I do think some things have gotten worse. We didn't see residential school denialism before the TRC, or even at the beginning of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've only seen residential school denialism in the last couple of years really emerge as a phenomenon, right? So the more that we seem to be educated, the more that there's this resistance, right, that's happening in this sort of political atmosphere against that we're threatening a certain way of life, or that we're instigating or making up a particular history, which is not true. So in some ways, it's gotten worse.
Wow.
Wow. Well, Riley and Vanessa, your perspective always so valued here on the show. So thank you so much, both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, up next, everybody, Chef Zach Kishig is back, and he's going to show us how he's redefining Indigenous cuisine in Canada. We'll be right back. everyone. We're going to explain this in just a second. But our next guest is redefining how we experience Indigenous cuisine, and he's doing it in a huge way. Less than a year after opening his restaurant, Na'Agan, it earned a spot on Canada's 100 Best Restaurants list. And once you've tasted his food, you will understand why.
So he forages local ingredients and crafts each dish to tell a story, transforming every meal into a true dining experience. Please welcome back to the show, Chef Zach Kishig.
Yes, thank you.
See you.
Okay, we will explain this in just a moment. I want to go back to Na'Agan, which is the restaurant name. What does Na'Agan mean?
So Na'Agan means dish in Ojibwe, so it's dish by Zach Kishig. With the restaurant, I wanted to showcase, techniques that I've learned from working in Michelin restaurants and 100 best restaurants, but, use ingredients that our people were using thousands of years ago, but bring it into, a modern, contemporary kind of cuisine.
Love it.
Amazing. Okay, so one of your goals is also to reframe how Indigenous cuisine is viewed here in Canada. So what do you hope to see change?
Well, we always hear about Chinese food, we hear about French food, Italian food, but my life's work has been to try to get, Indigenous cuisine on the mainstream of Canada and be a household name with everybody else.
Love it.
Absolutely. Let's help you do that.
Yes.
Okay, so I said this off the top. You're burning sage here. What's the significance?
So in the restaurant, we always burn sage as guests come in. It helps, cleanse the restaurant, cleanse the negative energy, and then we cleanse ourselves too.
Love it. Okay, so you brought some food, of course, and we're going to start with wild Canadian goose.
Yes.
Tell us about this, and we're going to dig in.
We've been very, very lucky in our restaurant to be able to start serving wild game that is shot from hunters that I get from the reserve that I'm from on Neoshingaming. So what we've done is a pancake underneath that we've made from wild rice flour that we blend in-house. Here we've used the Canadian goose breast and we've treated it like a prosciutto. We have some roasted sunflowers. We have some sage, oregano, and thyme from our garden. And then we finish it with some young pickled river grapes.
It is so good and rich.
Thank you.
Talk about this wild rice pancake. How did you make that?
So what we do is we get wild rice in. We blend it up in a blender, actually. We sift it till it's a fine powder almost. And then we can use it to make bread, to make the pancake, use it as a dusting for fish.
It is gorgeous.
Yes,
oh my
thank you.
gosh.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Okay, up next, we are going to try pigeon.
Yes.
And I understand you need to do some torching first. Tell us about this.
So in the restaurant, we like to torch just a little bit of juniper that we forge before the dish goes out to guests so that they have a bit of an experience. But what we've done here is we've cooked the pigeon on its crown over our birch bark grill. We've kind of smoked it. We've finished it with a glaze that we've made from magnolia vinegar, a bit of birch syrup, a bit of pigeon stock, and then on top is a bit of anise hyssop. To the side there is the leg of the pigeon that we've cooked in rendered bear fat. We have a carrot puree, and then we have a sauce that we've made from the pigeon bones, a bit more of that magnolia vinegar, some birch syrup, and then we finish it with some red currants.
Can we try it?
This
Can we
is
dig
just
in?
a work
Of
of art.
course.
Okay, first, before I try it, I want to ask, why is pigeon a meat that you wanted to highlight in your menu?
Well, what we've done is we've tried to get rid of using settler kind of ingredients. So we don't use chicken in our restaurant. We don't use pork. We've tried to go back to using, traditional or, more wild game meats. So we've used a bit more of the goose, birds, venison. We found a bison farm last year, and we're trying to incorporate that into our restaurant.
I've never tried pigeon. Actually, no, that's a lie. I have tried pigeon before. I've never tasted it.
It's nice, eh? Yeah.
This is very nice. Okay, birch. You said you've used birch. Can you tell us how?
Yeah, so birch has been used quite significantly in our culture, from making baskets to making houses to making canoes. But here we wanted to try to start cooking with it. So we use it quite a bit in our desserts, from using chaga to using the birch bark. But here we've lightly smoked the pigeon over our birch grill.
Okay, and the birch syrup also?
Yes, so birch syrup is almost like maple syrup. We harvest the birch sap, we reduce it down. It almost has a balsamic vinegar kind of a flavor.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
That's it.
You mentioned that you cook this in bear fat.
Yes.
And not oil. So why is that something you recommend?
We've tried to get rid of using olive oil, canola oil, different things like that, and go back to, using actual animal fat to cook with. So we'll render out duck to, cook with the duck fat. Here we've gotten this bear fat from the reserve that I'm from on Nawash. We've rendered it out, and then we've kind of poached the leg so it becomes very tender in the fat.
Oh my goodness. On your tasting menu, and I think I remember this the last time that you were here, you include non-alcoholic drink pairings.
Yes.
So what have you brought for us to try today?
So today, what we've brought is a fermented blueberry drink. We've salted it and fermented it for about 4 days. We've blended it and then seasoned it with a bit of beetroot vinegar.
Oh, I love it. It's not
that's
too
quite nice.
sweet. It's like the perfect amount of sweet and tart. It's beautiful.
Well, we've kind of made them to blend that would go nice with the pigeon, almost like a red wine, but not alcoholic.
This is
gorgeous.
beautiful.
Okay, so to end with, there's this gorgeous dessert. Tell us about it.
Yes. So this is sort of a palate cleanser that we use before our meat course. It's been made with choke cherries that were foraged on Nipissing First Nation by my sous chef. So what we've done is we've flavored it with sweet fern. I just want to let you guys have a little bit of a smell of that.
Oh, yeah, I do.
So this is sweet fern that's been foraged.
Ooh, I love that.
So it's been flavored with sweet fern. And then on top, we have an edible medicine wheel tuile. So starting from the bottom is a strawberry powder. We have a dried elderberry powder. To the top, we have a powder that's been made with pumpkin seeds. And then to the side there, we almost have a squash fruit leather. So the idea is to take your spoon, break through the medicine wheel, and dig down to the sorbet. Yeah.
Oh, that is incredible. So this is all edible?
All edible.
Oh my gosh,
Now
it's
tell
amazing.
us about the significance of this, because your presentation is absolutely stunning. So what is the significance
So it's
of the
called a medicine wheel for a reason. We have the sage, we have tobacco, we have cedar, and then we have sweetgrass there as well. But it also represents north, east, south, west. And then with this, we wanted to showcase this because it's a bit of our logo. And the idea is for guests to break through it, like I said, and dig down to that nice sorbet that we forged from one of the reserves that our sous chef is from.
It's so good. Oh I don't think I've ever had choke cherry before, but I feel like I've seen it on walks.
Yes.
I'm curious to learn more about it.
So we forged them, like I said, we forged them around our area, but they got this beautiful tart kind of tannicky flavor that works very well, blended into a sorbet. We don't use lemon in our kitchen anymore, so it brings that nice bit of acid that the sorbet needs.
Gorgeous.
This was so good.
I appreciate that.
Chef Zach, thank you so much for bringing these dishes.
I appreciate it.
Wow. All right, after the break, everybody, why revitalizing Indigenous languages is so critical today and how AI will be a vital tool in these endeavors. Fascinating combo coming up next.
Thank you.
This is amazing.
Welcome back. The United Nations General Assembly proclaimed this to be the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. This was done in part to draw attention to how critical the survival of Indigenous languages has become around the world.
Well, fortunately, there are growing initiatives across this country to revitalize Indigenous languages, and our next guest is a pillar in this effort. She's an Anishinaabemowin leader and advocate, Misko Gizig-Kwe, aka Red Cedar Woman. Welcome to The Social. Welcome.
Good to have you.
So, Misko, you say your journey with your language reflects the experience that a lot of Indigenous people have across this country. Can you explain that a little?
Yes, so with that, I didn't start my language journey until I was about a little girl, about 10 years old, when I first came into community on the reservation. And prior to that, I was only learning French, going to public school and things like that. And so for me, with that experience, it was a culture shock, I didn't know anything about my culture, didn't know anything about my language, but from then on, that's when I felt that connection, because I started learning about my identity. I started learning that my grandmother was a fluent speaker and she wasn't able to pass that language down. And so, there's that generational gap, and I'm part of that result.
All right, so as we mentioned, the UN has drawn attention to how critical the survival of Indigenous languages has become. So what makes it so urgent in your eyes?
It makes it urgent because when we lose our languages, we lose not only our identity, but we lose that ancestral knowledge that has been passed down for many generations. So for me, I think about the connection that I have to the land and to my community. Without the language, I wouldn't have that. For me, and a lot of people from across Turtle Island, when we don't learn our language, we feel like we have this hole in our being and in our spirit. And so it's urgent to reclaim our languages back, because we lose our ceremonies, we lose our way of life without it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Some people may or may not know this, but back in 2023, the federal government here reached a $2.8 billion settlement with Indigenous communities for the loss of language and culture. So that money is now being used to revitalize languages throughout these communities. Now, you actually sit on a board that decides how to use this money, which is so powerful. So what initiatives are you seeing and then implementing?
So I'm the Eastern Regional Director for the Four Pillars Society. I'm really proud to have that. Thank you.
Clap that up.
And with that, we have 326 First Nations across Canada that are in this lawsuit. And what I'm seeing at the board level is majority of these communities are gearing their initiatives to language. And I think they're gearing it to languages because it encompasses heritage, it encompasses wellness and healing for our Indigenous peoples across Canada. And so some of the things that I've seen is they are hiring elders and they're creating language hubs and they're ensuring that their language isn't going to be forgotten.
You also say that technology is vital in the revitalization of Indigenous language. Can you break that down and explain to us how there's a connection?
So I recently just attended Indigenous Global Language Summit, also known as Waves 2025, and they had a whole day dedicated to technology. And some of the things I seen there was that they had a hologram of an elder who could speak the language and you can converse with it. And I was like, what the heck? Like, this is the future, right? And I used to be on the fence about technology and language, you know, because it's sacred and, you know, it holds it's a spirit, right? And so seeing the technology thing, I was like, okay, that really changed my perspective because it's about the future. It's about the future generations, and so that's how we best serve them.
That's incredible.
That's fascinating.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. You've actually said that for some Indigenous peoples, there's some fear and trepidation when you get into this conversation around language. What does that mean exactly? What does that look like?
So with the effects of residential schools, right, we were forbidden to speak our language. We were forbidden to practice our culture. And so for me, I had to find that within my community through the different elders and community holders. And so there's a fear around that because a lot of people grew up in the Western world saying, this is bad, this is horrible, you know, you get punished for it, you know? And, you know, a lot of many horrible things that happen to my people for just practicing their language and culture. And so there's that cutoff, there's that disconnect, you know, like if I practice my culture, I'm gonna be, you know, seen as something invaluable to society, you know? And so there's that fear because it was instilled into our people. But, you know, other than the fear, I also see the resilience and I see the strength and I see the honorable work that my people are doing to ensure that our languages stay alive.
Yeah, great work. And I'm curious, how has learning and reconnecting with your language affected you?
It's been quite a journey, you know, because previous to, you know, being so involved with language, I also struggled with addictions, alcoholism, and even homelessness. And I have siblings that look up to me. And not only that, but future generations that are looking up to me to ensure that we keep our languages alive. Because I've always had a good knack with it, right? Like, it was just like, it came naturally to me. And so when I decided to really take on this language journey, I also put down the drugs, I put down the alcohol, and I made a better lifestyle for myself. Good.
You know, connecting to some of the discussions we had earlier in the show, how do you think that Indigenous language revitalization, you know, maybe moves us more collectively towards reconciliation?
Yes, you can, for me, I would like to see more things in the media. And what I mean by that is I really got excited about Star Wars and the Ojibwe dub. That's actually what got me into Star Wars. And then just having that excitement, I can only imagine what younger people think, you know, so seeing it more in media, you know, having accessibility to language like French, you know, I want to be able to watch my shows in Ojibwe or Oneida or whatever language I choose. And with that, it also opens up avenues for non-Indigenous peoples to learn languages. I really, I think it's important that non-Indigenous people learn the languages because it's the original language of this land, and it creates more authentic relationships when it comes to truth and reconciliation.
I love that. Well, we understand that miigwech means thank you in your language, so Misko miigwech.
Miigwech.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. All right, we're going to take another quick break, and then Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter and author Susan Aglukark joins us here next. We'll be back.
Welcome back. You're listening to the incredible music of our next guest. She is a Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter whose single Oseam made history as the first top 10 hit by an Inuk performer. She's also an officer of the Order of Canada and an advocate for Inuit and Indigenous youth.
Yes, please welcome to the social author of the new book, Kihiani, A Memoir of Healing, Susan Aglukark. Good to have you here.
Oh, Susan, it is such a pleasure to meet you. I can't believe it hasn't happened before. I mean, so many of us are familiar with your music. And we want to go back to the start because as a teen, you, like so many of us, spent hours watching artists like David Bowie and Annie Lennox on Much Music. And you thought to yourself while watching, if they can make it, maybe I can do the same thing. So fast forward a few years and your single Searching was actually playing on Much Music. So how does it feel to be here today in the studio, the Much studio, 3 decades later?
Where it was launched,
Exactly, right here.
Yeah, so how's Searching, Searching. Got on video, pardon me. It was a series of happenstances and opportunities. I had my job with Indian Affairs in Ottawa in 1989, 1990. And I shared in the book, it was part of the job. It wasn't this, you have a music video that we're producing, it's gonna get, I wasn't part of this conversation where somebody decided, let's submit it to Much Music and see what happens. So yeah, it was just this wake up one morning on your way to your job and you've been nominated for a music video award. It's like, what?
Wow.
What? So yeah, it was a pretty incredible first year in Ottawa, I'm going to say.
Yeah. That's incredible. All right, so you went on to discover the cathartic release that music could bring to your life. So let's talk about the debut album, Arctic Rose. You say it was a journey towards healing for yourself. How so?
So the process of Arctic Rose started shortly after moving to Ottawa. I moved away and to Ottawa for very personal reasons, none of which involved pursuing any kind of a career in a public life, music, any of that. And so I found myself very quickly in a recording studio in the company of artists and musicians where, as it turns out, maybe you are one, and knowing pretty quickly, I'm safe here. Safe to express, safe to explore, discovering all of this, and just sitting as I'm writing these songs in Arctic Rose, very personal songs, that sometimes that's enough. If you can have a place to put this, sometimes that's enough. And so Arctic Rose became the early discovering of expression as a way to heal and discover the tools that we need as Indigenous people to build and to access in our healing journeys.
Let's talk a little bit more about the healing journey because your memoir is deeply personal and you actually talk about your mother and how she didn't really give you or have herself the coping skills to navigate the trauma that you were experiencing. Do you think that those conversations around trauma have changed over the generations?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why I think it is so important that we share our stories, because when we discover, as we navigate our healing journeys, whatever the processes are, you know, there's this critical moment in my healing journey where I stopped being angry when I understood why my parents maybe couldn't be there for me in the way I needed them. And the context there is they came off the land. Their generation came off the land, and all of a sudden we're living in this coerced settlement with promises, and things were better to a degree, but there was other stuff that was being introduced. And they didn't have the tools to catch up with these new things, and then all this stuff starts happening to your children, and then what do you do with that? And so when I understood that piece, that was the beginning of a different part of the healing journey. And it wasn't so much that I blamed anyone necessarily, I just didn't understand why there was no support. Nobody knew what to do in that time. The tools weren't there, support wasn't there. It is there now, and we understand it now, and we develop them as we create these opportunities through storytelling and through very complex navigating of these healing places that we find ourselves in.
Very complex is a great way to describe it. So your second album, This Child, was groundbreaking, and I understand the memoir details the inspiration behind a lot of your songs during this time. So let's talk about that hit single, OCM. Am I saying that correctly? Okay, good. What message did you want to send with that particular song?
So there's a couple of things about OCM, and I need to correct one thing that I often hear, which is that OCM is Coast Salish. It's not Inuktitut as an Inuk person. It is not in my traditional language. The beautiful thing about Indigenous groups is that we understood protocol and permission. So in the beginning of the inspiration of OCM, I went to the gentleman from the Coast Salish Nation and asked, what is OCM? And may I use your words and the language in a song? And this is the early writing of the album, This Child, and they gave me permission. And so OCM became this extension of what they had done in a speaking engagement in Banff, Alberta in 1993, where before they spoke, and we were at the head table, and before they spoke, they welcomed and honored guests. And in that gesture, I understood, as an Indigenous artist, it's not about single story. It's not about just you. It's not even about pursuit of celebrity. It's about this larger story and opportunity and platform you're being given to share story and discover story. And so OCM is, we're all the same. We're all one story. We're all this journey. And so it becomes very special for that reason.
Yeah. Your music became a powerful voice for other people experiencing trauma. As an artist, what does that mean for you?
I think now, at this point in my life, having lived the lives I've lived, my traditional culture and this life here, these 30 years, it's hope in intergenerational healing. It can be done. It's just given opportunities and space to share our stories and discover them in the way that we need to discover them and share them.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for coming and sharing your story with us today. It has been an absolute honor.
Thank you.
Kiani, A Memoir of Healing is out now. Go out and get it. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I said we were having essential conversations, and I always learn something on this show every single day. We were taught, right?
Yeah.
Every single day I do. Today is no exception. And also, like, pigeon and wild Canadian goose.
I mean, come on.
So jealous. How
know.
was the pigeon?
Really good.
Both of them were incredible, and it's true what he said about the goose. It did taste like a sort of like
a prosciutto kind of.
Well, I tried to get some, but it magically disappeared off the shelf.
These days are so important, though. Just every single time we do a special like this, I'm just sitting here and I'm still digesting, thinking about everything that I'm learning, and just how much we don't know, and how much I want to know.
Yeah, it's true.
Absolutely.
I also love, this is the stuff people don't get to see backstage, but when our guests get to chat with each other backstage, some of them know each other and some of them don't. But that's the stuff that I wish we can have on like a webcam, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Find us on Crave, find us on YouTube. See you next time.